Hello, I'm Jeff Costa, and welcome back to another episode of How to Evaluate Out-of-State Long-Term Rentals. If you've watched my previous videos, you'll know that I always advocate having boots on the ground, meaning a local real estate agent in the market you want to buy in. The stuff I'm going to show you here today is meant to be complementary to your information, the information that you would get from a local real estate agent. So that information includes things like doing a video walkthrough of the property. Many agents will provide you pro formas of what they project rent and expenses to be, as well as information that is not available to you that might be listed in MLS listing notes, which you cannot access unless you have direct access to MLS. So like most interactions with an agent remotely, you will be added to a list of properties that meet your buying criteria. And my trusty right-hand man, Earl here, has done that for me. And you're seeing a list of homes, a list of emails about a specific home. And you'll see here that the very first entry of this comes here, right? Where this is a typical list of homes in the one home system. And here you'll see the list of matching homes. I happen to key in on this 16 Greely Street. And again, notice the date here, right? This is July 16th. And here I've done in Gmail just a list of all the emails I've seen for this house. Now, what's interesting here too is that you see a few more interesting things here. I also have a Zillow search set up. So Zillow will send me this email when I've saved it, and it tells you as a prompt, hey, take the next step, right? And then you'll see up here a price drop, right? Let's see what that is. So we went from July 16th to July 21st, about what, 5 days? And now we have a price drop for this same home to the tune of $6,600. So the first thing that you want to look for is monitoring this kind of stuff, right? It's pretty uncommon to see a price drop by almost $7,000 in a handful of days. This tells me that we have a motivated seller, right, who wants to exit the property. So as a buyer, if this property actually met our criteria and we want to put an offer in it, we definitely know we're dealing with a motivated seller, and there may or may not be room to negotiate further, right? It just depends on what the circumstances that are here that is driving this seller to drop the price so aggressively. So we're going to go into the house right now and look at the listing in Zillow. And a few things to note about this. This is a duplex built in 1920, very common for this area. And it has a gas forced air system, and it gives you a little bit more information here. One of the things I like about when I look at these houses is off-street parking. So a private driveway is very, very good. Modern updates throughout, great that the agent calls this out. We want to see what that actually means, right? And you definitely always want to kind of look at what they're saying here in terms of, you know, what improvements have been made. These are going to be the big things that they're going to call out to you. This property also is 2365 square feet, so you get about 1,100 square feet per unit, which is great. I like to give my tenants room to move, and that's a pretty important thing. So the next thing that I'm going to look at here almost immediately is like, what kind of crime is in this area? So I'm going to hover over the address and I'm going to open up spot crime, which is right here. And I'm just going to plug in the address and see what it brings me back. And this actually is a great little tool that lets you see what crime is happening, or has happened rather, nearby. Now I see a few things down here on Hotel Ave, which is the main street this is off of. We'll dismiss that. This is the property here, and they're using obviously Google Maps to overlay it. But you see a few different things here. These are all the same icon. So if I click into one of these, I see, oh, this was a theft. And I click in more information and I can see, oh, this was a larceny and BPD is investigating. So This is not necessarily that concerning to me. Obviously, I want to see no crime anywhere near where I'm purchasing, but I kind of understand the area, right? It has a little bit of diciness to it, which I am willing to accept as a risk. So let's go back. We know that the crime is good. We're going to go back to the listing and just kind of look at what jumps out at you here. So the awnings are a little bit of a dated feature. It doesn't mean I wouldn't buy the property, but nothing really alarming there, right? I see a pretty solid foundation without cracks. And again, you need to get closer than I'm showing you right now. I definitely see two different types of siding being used here, right? So some of it is probably newer than the other, and it's notoriously hard to match siding, but you have to keep that in mind, right? Like at some point you're going to probably have to replace the other half of it. I also see glass block windows here, which are really great for the Buffalo, New York climate, because it means that the basement is going to be well protected against weather. And I see a couple of outside gas meters, which is exactly what you want to see. Now this could be a little separation right here. I don't know until we would get closer to it, or you would walk the property with your agent. There may be a better shot up ahead. Here I see the other side of the property. It looks like the downspouts are in reasonable shape. These kind of look like they've been flattened. We would investigate that. Not seeing anything in the eaves and soffits. The roof looks really solid. I would have to question why the window's open here in the attic, but we'll get into that. And then you can see, again, you want to kind of look at the neighbors' houses too, right? What do they look like? And they seem to be in about the same condition as this house is. So again, just eyeballing it. So again, hard to see. Would want to definitely get this looked at to see what it really looks like. Definitely, probably need some repainting on this side. We do see the same features of different types of siding. That means replacement was done at some point in the past. And then a little bit of a closer up view here. I don't see a lot of landscaping here, so you're not seeing tenants with like a whole lot of pride of ownership who are trying to plant things, nor do you see the actual owner doing it. And here we do actually see a couple cracks, right? So again, every picture tells a story, and you want to try to get as much of this information out of these photographs and pass it to your realtor before he does a walkthrough, before she does a walkthrough, right? To understand what kinds of things that they ought to be looking at. Now, a good agent will automatically pick this stuff up because they've got experience looking at a number of different homes. But definitely some cracking here that could be problematic. Another view of the two gas lines. And you can see the street in this photo. So there's definitely a sidewalk here, which could be good for those who want to exercise or use sidewalks. These look like very new electrical meters. So the listing actually called out that the house has new electric. So this is why you're seeing these brand new non-weathered electrical meters. Okay, here we are at the back of the house, and we see a little bit of neglect here, right? Some cracking in the concrete, not necessarily a deal breaker, but evidence that the existing owner probably is not taking care of the property all that well. And again, I'm going to also look at what's around me, right? You never buy a house in a vacuum. You want to see what the other houses are. Are they being kept up by the owners? Here we see a fence that's falling down. We see the backside of someone's garage who largely hasn't taken care of it. Potentially a fence that was here at one point and not totally removed. I see some decay, and some siding that's coming up here on this house. And the siding is decaying on this house. And you see some really old shingles here in this house that are likely past the point of being needing to be replaced, as well as for the neighbor's garage. So again, this is not bearing on your house, but you have to understand that you can't change the location of a house. So you've got to be comfortable with what's around it. Here's the front porch. I saw this a little bit in the previous photos. It looks like some of these planks have started to come up. Again, a minor nit, something you might have to repair in the future, but not something certainly that would block me, from actually buying the house. Interesting thing here is if you see through here, you don't see another house, but you see a parking lot of what looks like something industrial. So when we get to Google Maps, we're going to look at that and understand what that is. So this looks like a house that's a couple doors in from some sort of factory or a business, which may or may not be important, but it would probably mean that you might not see a ton of families on this street. You might see people who want to live close to where they work. Next slide. Okay, so now we're into the house and we see the kitchen and we see a really mixed bag here, right? We see some, it looks like some painted wood paneling. The floors are tile. They look like they're in good shape. I see a much older sink here, double sink, with a older faucet, so you can kind of see that that hasn't been updated. And you see that there's different styles here, right? Like this was not painted where everything else was. And some carpet. Not always a fan of carpet because you ultimately have to replace it. It doesn't wear very well as vinyl plank flooring does. Here we're into one of the bathrooms. This looks like it's in really good shape, but again, you see the same sort of mix of old and new, right? I've got an old vanity, an old toilet paper holder here, and an older sink, right? So I might, if it merits it in this neighborhood, want to consider updating those. Here's another view of the same, right? I definitely see some who knows what on the tile. Again, leading me to believe that perhaps the previous tenants didn't take care of it as well. I see what looks like a potential hole here in the shower and so forth. So there might be some repair work and some caulking that needs to be done here in general cleanup. Here is one of the main rooms in the house. Now this is a really good sized room that would allow you to put some couches out as well as mount TVs on the wall. I definitely see that this is using the forced air heat and so forth that we saw. The windows, hard to say. I always like vinyl windows, but there may be some older ones. These look like vinyl, but that is something you would check with your agent once you got into the house. And again, vacuumed carpet looks clean, probably has a few more years of life left to it before you would replace it. Painting looks good, but again, this is something that you would judge once the agent got in the house to determine if you needed some fresh paint. Same thing really here, right? Not seeing anything crazy. Here is another view of the tub. Again, the little punch out here kind of concerns me a bit. These look like vinyl windows. Here's the kitchen. Now, the sink again is old and should jump out at you. The cabinets are old. Doesn't mean they're not functional. They look like they would be. You are obviously missing a gas stove here because you see the actual piping to it. So that is something you would have to budget for as a capital expenditure. Nor do I see a fridge. Maybe it's in another photo. Also here you see some really older, what looks like mauve, I guess is the color, indoor-outdoor style carpeting, right? So definitely a bit of an older look. Here's another way of looking at the house from a different direction, and you kind of see that there is definitely some space here. This looks like a new ceiling fan with a remote, and perhaps a couple of bedrooms are right here. And we'll go on forward. Again, another view. Looks like some older sliding windows, but they do look like they're vinyl. Here's a view from the upper. Right now we get a little bit more clear view that is definitely, if you look through here, parking for some sort of industrial space. Again, this may or may not turn you off depending on the type of tenant that you're looking for. But this area looks like it's in reasonable shape. And here's the door to it. The door looks a little weathered, not uncommon for Buffalo, where you have really, Buffalo weather being quite hard on homes. And then we have the entranceway here. Now this looks, to my eye, just kind of bad. It looks like it has a lot of wear and tear on the steps over the years. Could use potentially some paint on that rail, but certainly functional, right? But it depends on, what you want this to look like for your tenants. Now we're in the attic. Very clean. Don't see a whole bunch of stuff that someone's going to have to clear out, which I always love. Hoarder houses are wonderful. You get to inherit all the stuff and clean it out. But I really can't tell much from this. That doesn't look like the roof is necessarily new. Hard to tell though from this one single photo. And it looks like there may be a crack in that stack. Maybe it's just a trick of the light, but that's something you'd want to have your agent investigate while there. And then, yep, here we are. We're showing that this is close to Hertel Avenue, which is a very popular area. So you're really kind of showing that the agent is including this picture as the last one in the group to show that you're close to, actually this is Elmwood. So you're actually close to that. So sometimes you'll see some landscape type photos included. I'm not sure why the agent chose to do that. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do here is jump into this area. So let's look at what the zip code 14207 looks like. And again, we're going to use niche.com. So I click here on search, pop in the zip code, and I want to learn about what this area is. So this is a B area, right? If you know the classification systems, the A, B, C, D, right? Not great for jobs and housing. What I look for here is what the median home value is. So it's about 73.7, and again, this house is listed for 229, so we're above that. And what the median rent is here is also interesting, right? So it means that you may be in a different part of the zip code that is higher home values, but it should give you some sense of that. You'll also notice here that you have a definite skew toward renters. 65% are renters. Not uncommon, but that's something you want to take into account. I always try to look for areas where there tends to be more owners than renters. That just tells me something about the area. Down here, I look at something that stands out almost immediately is median household income of 30K. I usually like to see that higher, somewhere around the 50K mark. But that is important because once we figure out what the rents are going to be, you're going to want to calculate whether someone who makes $30,000 a year can afford 30% of that money going, broken down per month, going to housing. It's roughly estimated that 30% of income is dedicated to housing. So we'll calculate that. I'm going to guess that that's going to be borderline, largely because that median household income is so low. And what we're getting at here is affordability of the house for someone who makes that income. Here we see that the education level is only 16% college educated. I tend to look for numbers that are higher than that, into the 30s and 40s. And then you can actually learn a little bit more about the residents and who lives here by looking at these demographics. And I always look at age, right? So who is renting? We already established this is for renters. Who's renting here? Well, it's people in their mid 20s to mid 30s, right? By and large. Some older, but largely you're not seeing a whole bunch of young people, and it's not a whole bunch of 65 plus people. So you kind of get an idea of who's here. Let's look at it from another tool. We're going to grab the address again, and we're going to plug it into this neighborhood rating that Roofstock has. And we're going to pick, it automatically finds the name. We're going to go look at the property rating and see what Roofstock thinks about it. It's a 2-star neighborhood from them, right? And it's a lower income neighborhood with kind of an even mix in terms of what they see. They're generally older, and the school district quality is below average. But you could see higher cash flow in these type of markets. Another one I like to do is best places to live, right? So we're going to enter a zip code here, just the zip code. And again, what am I doing? I'm looking at multiple different data sources to figure out what I can learn about this environment, right? Don't depend just on niche. Look at every data point you can get your hands on. Oh, looks like that didn't work. So let's try that again. 14207. There we go. All right. So what can this tell me? What does best places tell me? Right? It's got positive population growth, something I definitely want to see. Median home price is 119. Again, compare that to what we saw over here on Niche, right? Where Niche said that the median home price was in the 73,000 range. Median age around 31.5, that kind of aligns to what we saw at Niche, right? And then it kind of gives you a little bit more data. And what are the cons here? You want to look at, like what are the pros of living in this area? Well, nearby recreation. Some unattractive winter snow. That's why I no longer live in Buffalo. And the economy, right? Unemployment rate. That's not a great thing for Buffalo as a whole. All right, so we're going to come back here. And remember that we have this median household income. So let's figure out what we could get for rents on this place. And there's two tools I use to do that. We're going to use Rentometer, which is a paid subscription, which of all the things in your toolbox that you have, I always recommend getting that, right? So paying for that service. So this is, it looks like this again is a 2-1. Potentially a 3-1. We'd have to go back and check. I believe they don't break it out here, but we're gonna assume these are 2-1s, and maybe one's a 3-1 or one's a 2-1. But let's go back over here. We're gonna put in 2 beds, 1 bath, and look back 3 months to see what the recent rents are. Make sure you have house and duplex selected, and we'll say analyze. So the rent here is shown in this section right here, right? The average rent is $11.90. You see that the median is $10 higher than that, so about $1,200. And then let's look at another tool called Rentcast. So we're going to pop in the same address. It looks it up. We're going to say this is a 2-1. And pop it in. And I like Rentcast as another data point here. I trust Rentometer more. But what you're looking for is congruency, right? The estimated monthly rent is $11.50 here, $11.90 to $1,200 here. The nice thing about Rentcast is you get kind of a low and a high estimate to kind of give you some boundaries. And one thing you'll look at here is you want to look at the aging of some of this data. So this is 1 day ago. Here's one for 1050. Here's one for 1,000, but it's 152 days ago. Almost want to throw that data point out, as with this one. Here's one for 925 of 30 days ago, and a 1450 of another comp 183 days ago. So I guess the point here is be careful of what you're looking at in terms of the comps, but I would say that it's probably a healthy assumption to assume that you could get $11.90 for this house. So we're going to use that as the rent, right? And what we're going to do here is we're going to check on in terms of the household income of, let's say, 30,187 divided by 12 is $215.15 per month. And what I'm checking here is I'm going to go into this calculator that essentially will tell me what the rent to income ratio is, right? And again, we said that was about 30%. So we said 2515, right, is what we thought that should be. And then the monthly rent, what did we decide on from Rentometer, right? Let's just say $11.90. We'll go with that. $11.90. So right off the bat, what does this tell me? If I believe that this income is $30,000, that means to afford a $11.90 rent, that's going to be 47% of someone's income. That's really high. When you can see that a good rent to income ratio is around 30% of gross. Now, if we go back here and we say here, the median income is $24,900, right? Our numbers are going to get even worse, right? So and that's not great, right? So the thing that immediately jumps out at you is it's great that you can have this information, right? Like you can get this rent, but here's the problem: are you going to be able to find someone who can pay it? Well, based on what you've learned about this zip code with a median household income of 30 or potentially lower at 24, that's a deal breaker, right? I don't know that I could get this rent. right? And then you look at the one that was 1 day ago, 1150. That's probably more practical, right? Something in the $1,000 range. So we're going to run our numbers here and just kind of see how this one shakes out. I am going to grab the address again, and I'm going to jump into my trusty, handy dandy DealCheck tool. If you don't have this is another service I highly recommend you pay for. Well worth its weight in gold. It's a way to really quickly mess with your assumptions about a property to see how it's going to cash flow, and really a whole bunch of information that's kind of in a halo around the property. So this helps you quickly make decisions and negates the need to always have to be creating, individual spreadsheets for every property. So I'm going to say new rental property, import property data. I'm going to pop in the street address, 16 Greely Street. Notice that it automatically populated that. I click on search, and I'm going to come here, and it's going to pull in what it knows from public sources about this this property. Here we go, 5 bedrooms, 2 baths. The realtor.com estimate of 229, which is I believe where it gets this information. So there's my 229. And notice here it uses RentCast as well, and it said $1,200 a month. Again, I'm not sure I believe that, right? Tax information, $338, that seems low. Property insurance also seems low. Again, you're gonna get some default values here, and you're gonna wanna tweak them, right? And then here's the pictures that cross-validate that yes, this is in fact the property. I'm gonna click Save Property, and it immediately drops me into the property analysis. And here it assumes I'm paying full price. It tells me how much I'm going to finance. This is what I'm gonna put down. These are gonna be my purchase costs, 16 grand for closing, title, legal fees. And my total cash to close is about 74K. Here's a little detail on the financing. Again, I'm assuming a 30-year rate mortgage at 6.25. That's probably going to change by the time you read this, probably upward. What the valuation is, this is more about if I'm doing rehab, which I am likely not gonna do for the sake of this example. But the area you want is cash flow, right? So again, we pulled in $1,200 for rent. So right now, that looks pretty good, but I don't think we can get that. We'll get to that in a moment. I also have a reserve for vacancy of 5%. Some people choose 3. I'm more conservative here. When I do my underwriting, I want to see conservative numbers and see if it works. So the first thing I'm going to change here is not going to go to 1,200. I'm going to go to 1,000, or actually we'll go to, let's go to 1,000 for now, right? And then I see my operating expenses here. One thing I always see DealCast being wrong on is property taxes. And you see that at 338, just go into the listing again and scroll down to the bottom here, and you'll see annual tax amount 975, right? So it's definitely like 3 times higher than that. And then it's a duplex, so you're probably going to pay around $1,400. Let's even go more conservative, $1,500. Property management, I have that set at 9. We'll make that 10%. This is definitely an older home, so you saw the pictures. I have really high numbers here of maintenance and capex, again, because I'm being very conservative. Sometimes you'll see these drop to about 7% total. But I could see, some capex expenditures here as well. So you can play with those numbers to your content. This house doesn't look like it has a lot of updates, so I'm going to keep those high. In Buffalo, we pay for lawn care and snow removal to the tune of about $70 per month, which I have here. And as a landlord, I also pay for water every quarter, every 3 months. So back over here to property analysis. Now I can see that when I plugged in my numbers, like this is actually a negative, right? Negative cash flow. Not what we want to buy, right? But again, let's even be a little more generous, right? Let's say we get that 1190, right? I don't think we're anywhere near that. I'm almost thinking we're closer to this number. But let's say what this looks like at 1190, right? So we go in here and we'll add 1190 and we'll say go back, right? This looks a little more positive, right? Now that you're making $76 per unit, but you're only clearing $151 a month. Again, you can change some of these assumptions based on what you believe about the property. But this is just a first cut at it, right? So I'm gonna go. You'll end up spending a lot of time here in this purchase worksheet. Another thing we noticed, right, that we didn't see a fridge or any kind of stove. So here I have rehab costs where I can put that in. And I didn't really see it for both units, but let's assume, that we're gonna need a stove, we're gonna need a fridge for at least both units. So we'll say that's $2,000 per unit, $2,000 per building, and actually it's one building, so we'll say $4,000, right? So we're gonna go to the scratch and dent store, and we're gonna do that, right? And there may be other things that we need here, but again, I'm just going back over in that here, and you'll see that 4,400 now shows up here as rehab costs and increases my total cash needed, right? So again, not a lot of profit here, guys, right? $76 per unit. So let's see what happens if I change my thinking here, and maybe I'm being a little bit too tough on these numbers. Maybe I'm not going to have all that much capex, right? So maybe I drop that down to 5% of rent, right? And what does that look like now? Well, it gets a little better, right? I'm breaking the $100 mark per unit, and that's reasonable. But this house looked like it's pretty rough, so I'm going to assume that there may be some deferred maintenance hanging around. The other thing you want to look at here is some of the financial ratios in the purchase criteria. Notice that a lot of the ratios are year one, right? This looks scary as hell when you see negative 31% year one. If you're in real estate, you're not looking for instant returns. You're a buy and hold investor. So you want to look at a different section right here called buy and hold projections, right? But take a look at some of the purchase criteria. And again, you have control over these purchase criteria. And this is meeting, some of my buckets, like, hey, it's less than $80K out of pocket. It passes the 1% rule, passes the 50% rule for expenses. Cash flow is greater than 2. The cash flow per unit is less than 2. Not really ideal, right? So again, I can play with some of this, but I'm going to urge you to actually be realistic with yourself. Spreadsheets are only as good as the data that goes into them, as is DealCheck, right? If you are pretending not to see something to inflate your numbers, you're gonna be in for some pain, right? So I always try to be as hard on these properties as I can to say, like, gosh, what would happen if I could only get $1,000 a month, right? Like, or what was the rent check? 1030, right? Let's go worst case scenario, right? 1030. What would that look like, right? And I'll even go back and look at this now. Now it's $44 a unit, right? And if I go to my expenses and I kick this CapEx back up to 10 and maybe drop the maintenance down to 8, maybe that's a little more realistic. Like I don't know without getting into the property what CapEx things I might have, right? Now we're back to negative numbers, right? So this house is a little bit troubling, right? Like I wouldn't probably cash flow right out of the box for this house, especially given the age of things in the kitchen, some remodeling I might need to do. And again, I wouldn't do that remodeling unless other houses in the neighborhood had that, right? And we're at that I'm remodeling to the level of my competition. So again, all of this with a grain of salt. One thing I will point out too is that you kind of want to see a really nice balance here of your operating expenses. This is a pie chart that as you hover over it kind of shows you where your money's going every month. And a lot of times in New York in general, property taxes are killer. They're super high. So you could see property taxes sometimes being almost half of this pie chart. They're pretty reasonable in this area of Buffalo. So another thing you'll look at here is buy and hold projections. And this, again, gets you out of looking at just a single year, right? Like it tells you here the income and the expenses that you're going to pay for year 1, 2, 3, and then we jump to 5, year 5, 10, 20, and 30. right? So it's really good to kind of look down here and see, like, what am I getting from a cash flow perspective? Really not a lot, right? Not a lot. I get some tax benefits and deductions. You get to write off depreciation. How do we think this thing is going to grow over time in terms of equity? And then, the cost of sale is down here. And then I can see, my total profit numbers down here, that if I held this thing for 30 years, I might get 410 back out of my outlay, right? Of initial cash down and what I've spent over the years. Investment returns are really great too. A lot of people look at ROI or IRR to kind of see where things are, and you can see some negatives here, guys, right? And some low numbers. It might work out for this property if you could hold it for 30 years, but I don't think so, right? This is probably one that wouldn't cash flow the way you want. And the last thing I want to do, and I probably should have done this earlier, is I like to drive, quote unquote, the property, right? I plug it into Google and I want to see what's around it, right? So here's the house itself, right? And we see that it's near Hertel Avenue. What's interesting is in the listing, it calls out that it's walking distance to Hertel. But if you go back here to the photos, remember that the last photo that they showed you was Elmwood Avenue, right? Which is kind of deceiving, right? Because Elmwood's over here, right? It is walking distance, right? It's a couple blocks away, right? And Elmwood is a nice district, right? You'll see some nice areas of Elmwood. But definitely, the thing that comes out immediately is what was across the street looks like an industrial area. And we were right. Industrial Medicine Associates, there's the USPS right there. Again, not a big deal, but you're probably not going to see too many families. On the upside, you see a Buffalo PD area here, right? So we looked at the crime report, right? So it's nice to know that if you called the police, they're pretty close by. And you want to kind of just pull back a little bit and see what's around this. Okay, so this is kind of nice. Like there's a McDonald's and a Home Depot and PetSmart, right? Target. So, these are nice stores that are just a few blocks over. So this house being remember it was a B neighborhood, would definitely be pretty close to all of these amenities, which is kind of nice, right? So you can see what's around it. A good amount of fast food restaurants, sometimes a good thing, sometimes a bad, but here's Starbucks, right? And when I see a Starbucks, it's in a Target, right? So it's not a standalone, but what you're looking for is a lot of times the restaurants have done their due diligence about, should I put a store in this neighborhood? So you get to kind of lean on what they did. And then the last thing I want to do, and I always do this, is I look at the photographs. Now, you never really know when the Google mapping truck went by, right? But what am I looking for here? A lot of different things. So here's the property, and you see that whoever the renter is has a lot of Christmas spirit. They put up lights, right? So what does that tell me? Of somewhat of a friendly tenant. I can see here a little bit of picture of the roof. It looks to be probably halfway through its life, but in good condition. This picture was taken in the fall, right? By evidence of the leaves on the ground in Buffalo. So I am looking for other signals of what this neighborhood looks like. Over here, I see the neighbor's house with some, looks like patchwork, siding repairs, missing siding up here, evidence that this neighbor might not be taking great care of that house. Over here, what am I looking for? What's across the street? Oh, now this wasn't really obvious before, but here's the back side of one of those medical buildings, right? And another one here. And then here, of course, is the parking lot that you saw, right? There's the USPS. So handy to actually mail a letter. This is a DaVita. I believe that's a dialysis place. And you're pretty close to Hertel Ave. So, I want to see what's down the street here. How are my other neighbors taking care of it? What am I looking for here too? Like, are these houses painted? Are the lawns being cared for and raked? Are the leaves being picked up, right? You're looking for subtle signals of how people care for the neighborhood. Is there trash in the yard, right? And these houses look like they're in reasonable condition, right? For the most part. You also want to look for socioeconomic indicators. What kind of cars do people in this neighborhood drive, right? Are they flashy cars? Are they not flashy cars, right? Like, are they, are they comparable for what the neighborhood is? We have an activist neighbor here, not a problem to me, but it could be to others, right? So I'm generally seeing reasonable landscape. The trees are the shrubs are trimmed right here, right? The neighbors are picking things up. So I see a little bit of dilapidation, not a lot. These homes look to be generally well cared for. Looks like some work is being done here in the street. So you've got some reasonable pride of ownership on this street. Again, you can't be there to drive this in person. So you're kind of looking to get a signal. Here's one that needs a paint job, right? We don't see leaves being picked up here, and that sort of thing. So, you're trying to draw some conclusions based on what you can see and understand that, some of this data is potentially old, right? Like, we don't know when this was recorded. Oh, actually, we do know when. This was November 2020. So the data here is about 2 years old, right? So this is why you need to have your agent with you to see what this looks like today. Could have changed for the better or for the worse in the span of 2 years. So finally, back over here to DealCheck. Again, I really spent a lot of time in this tool. You can also look up, sales comps for comparable sales if they have them, and you can see what other homes nearby have sold for, right? If I want to say sort by distance, here's one on the same street that was sold back in February for $180, and it's a 5-bed 2-bath. Here's one a little less than half a mile away, sold for $150. So your agent's going to be able to give you comps, but again, in the spirit of look for as many data points as you can, you always want to look for this information. And then finally, we're going to look at rental comps, right? And again, this is using rent cast estimates. It's telling me that $1,200 is what I should get for this. The average listed rent is $190, and you can see the range here. Kind of looks a lot like what we saw over here, because RentCast and DealCheck are the same company. And then down here, you can see the comparable rentals, and they're breaking these down by similarity, right? 850, 700, 1200, 1300, and you get dates here. Okay, so if I want to even go by distance, right? Like 850 for one on this street, 700 for one on the street. On the busy Hertel Ave, you can see the rents bump up, right? Hertel. And this one's St. Florian, 1200. Again, a 2-bath, 1450. Looks like looks like the same apartment there. Hertel, 1100. So be careful on your rent estimates, right? And your agent should be able to tell you quite a bit about rents, right? I always have a trick of I come up with my own rent estimates and then blind ask the agent for them, right? I want to know what the agent thinks the rent should be, independent of my own estimates. The other thing I do is I have a property manager in Buffalo. Independent of my own estimates, what I get from the agent and his pro forma, I ask the property manager who knows the area, like, hey, what do you think we could get for this address? I don't give him numbers. Again, do it blind. Get as much data as you can. And that will help you make the most informed decision that you can. Now, this property is not for me for some of the reasons we discussed earlier, but hopefully this gives you a sense of how I look at properties. So if you have any comments on this or ways you feel like we could make this better, places you want me to spend more time, please leave a comment in the YouTube comments. And we'll be back with another one of these next week. I suggest that you guys watch all of these as you develop and learn. Again, I'm probably missing something here too. So, I might look back on this in 6 months and laugh at what I'm using or how I've done this. So I always want to get better. So if there's some other data source that you like to use, please let me know. But hopefully this was helpful for you. Thanks for listening. Talk to you soon.